homework, just admit it. If you did not understand the assignment, ask for help. If you did not study for the test, accept the grade and resolve to do better with my help if necessary next time. If you refuse to follow my rules, accept the consequences. This is not a democracy. This is my classroom, and I am here to teach you, to inspire you, to help you grow. I will do my part, the rest is up to you. Now, just look at it. How teachers handle the students. If the relationship is not built between the teacher and the student, students have a tendency to shut off their mind, and all that we transmit, all that we teach will become overhead transmission. Overhead transmission is bouncer. It just goes above the head. Nobody will be able to understand what we are trying to say, not because we are not teaching them well, just because we have not connected with the students. Connecting with the students, establishing a relationship is one of the most important aspects. This teacher appears to be very strict, very tough. Maybe she means business, but at the end of the day, very few students would be able to connect with he or she, because teaching should bridge the gap between the student and other students, including the teacher, and only then people would be willing to listen and then apply that knowledge in an appropriate context. One set of teachers start believing that it is my job to teach and it is the student's job to learn. How many of you agree with this? Let us make this an interactive session. It's not a one-way street. Please feel free to unmute your mic and participate. How many of you believe that I'm getting paid, I'll do my job, it is the student who has paid the fee, let them take the learning process seriously and let them study. That is their job, that is not my job. So that means to say, all of us believe that we should go that extra mile, do more than what is required and keep on doing it. Our job doesn't end with teaching. We need to go much beyond teaching. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. Like, I heard a lot of my friends saying at the beginning of my career, even the best jockey cannot convert a mule into a racehorse. Even the best jockey cannot convert a mule into a racehorse. So why are you unnecessarily trying to bother so much about students? Because we are getting paid, we should do our job. Because they are paying, it is their business to be attentive in the class and benefit from our lecture inputs. Now, because parents are not doing their jobs effectively, they are not disciplining their kids. That's the reason what all nonsense they should do at home, they are doing it here. Our students are not participative, they are not doing their work, they are not motivated. We can come out with a number of reasons as to why they are not being attentive in the class or why they are not being effective in the class. But there is another end of the spectrum. You've got teachers who believe that it is their responsibility to create the conditions and support systems to ensure student learning. Because they feel if the student fails, they themselves have failed. So basically, this set of teachers believe that they should take up the ownership. And only then there would be some kind of a possibility of growth. There are two types of teachers. Drawing from the animal kingdom, Marjala Kishora Nyayam and Markata Kishora Nyayam. One set of teachers behave like a monkey. If you see a monkey which is jumping from one branch to another branch, the baby monkey is holding the mother. The responsibility is of that baby monkey. If the baby does not hold the mom properly, it will slip and fall, and in the process it will die. Mother is not taking care of the child. It is the child who takes ownership. So one set of teachers follow this theory called Markata Kishora Nyayam, which means I will do my job and I expect students to do their job. Am I audible? Just in case, if it is not audible, do let me know, because there's no response from any corner. So I started believing that maybe my voice is not carrying. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Okay, fine.
Yes, sir.
Your voice is loud and clear.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. So at the other end, we have got another example drawn from the animal kingdom only, like the way how a cat handles its kittens. If you have ever observed, the cat will hold its kittens through its mouth and takes it to places where there is a greater possibility of getting the feed, which is probably milk. It will start dropping its kids in those houses where there is a greater certainty that the kittens are properly taken care of. So cats take ownership of the children, whereas monkeys seldom bother about it. Now, there is a very popular saying in HR which goes like this: if you don't pay cashew nuts, if you don't pay cashew nuts to your employees, that means you are paying peanuts. If you are paying peanuts, you can only get monkeys. So employees in an organizational setting may not take ownership of their students, I mean educational institution, because they believe that whatever we are getting paid is more than sufficient, or it is grossly insufficient, so we need not do our job effectively. That is why Dr. Nelson Mandela says, in today's economy, to ruin a country, you don't require arms and ammunition. If you dilute the educational standards, the nation will crumble on you. You don't need to do anything beyond that. So I hope and trust this message is very loud and clear. Irrespective of the fact whether we are getting paid peanuts or cashew nuts, it is in the interest of the nation, it is in the interest of the global society that we take ownership of our students. We go that extra mile and help them, because our job does not end in the classroom. Our job goes much beyond that. Let me share a pic. I just want somebody to identify this person. Can somebody recognize this individual? Please feel free to unmute and respond in case if you know this person. This person is none other than
Is a
somebody.
politician. Politician. He has
Okay,
selected
somebody.
for the Modi's cabinet. Is he selected for Modi's cabinet?
Okay. Okay, I have heard that he's a politician. Can anybody make another guess? I'll give one more opportunity. Ideally, I would like to give 3 opportunities, but time may not be on our side. That's the reason I'm just sticking to only one person. This guy is Dr. Alok Sagar. He's a PhD from Houston University in Electrical Engineering at Texas. He's a former IIT Delhi professor, and he has trained the best minds, including the ex-RBI Governor Raghuram Rajan. He left IIT Delhi in 1982 and has been living in a tribal house without any doors for the last 38 years. He has planted 50,000 trees and he has educated quite a number of people, tribal people, living with them, and he got into limelight only in the last 3-4 years because somebody was trying to say that he is an antisocial element. Then he was prosecuted. Then everybody got to know that he is a professor, or he was a professor of IIT Delhi. He is none other than Dr. Alok Sagar, a teacher who has left the portals of IIT also and started living with tribal villagers, could still contribute significantly for the national interests. So you can imagine what a person can become even if they are not contributing in the classroom. And before we proceed further, one more question that I would like to ask. I would like to show the picture of an individual. I want you to recognize this individual before we proceed further. Because these 2 photographs will have a very deep impact on what we are going to discuss today. And that's precisely the reason why I thought I'll take some time to talk about these 2 people also upfront, so that the message will be driven home very clearly. Okay, just in case if you have not seen this person, this guy is Dr. Anurag Kumar, who was ranked 65th. I repeat, who was ranked 65th in the entrance of All India Institute of Medical Sciences of 2019. Just last year, around this time, he was declared 65th rank holder for the entrance examination of All India Institute of Medical Sciences, a prestigious institution in the country. He was a junior resident doctor of All India Institute of Medical Sciences, aged 25 years, specialized in psychiatry. From the 10th floor of All India Institute of Medical Sciences, Delhi, in June 2020 and died on the spot. He was suffering from depression. I repeat, 25 years old, rank holder, junior resident doctor of All India Institute of Medical Sciences, jumped from the 10th floor and committed suicide. Brilliant in academics, learned everything that was required in a classroom environment, and that too specialized in psychiatry, and committed suicide. I want you to reflect upon what is education. Okay. We will have
Just
all
need
kinds
one
of.
minute.
Yes.
Sir, 1 minute. I request all the participants that if you have any questions, please drop in the message chat box. Either I will read out or Sri Hari sir will see the question.
Sure.
Or you can unmute yourself and speak.
Yes, I think that would be the best option. If you can unmute and speak, I think everybody also would get to know.
Sir, I think they cannot unmute. They can raise their hand and we will unmute them, sir, and they can speak.
Okay, fine. But I don't need to raise my hand, isn't it?
No, sir. If they want to ask a question, they can.
Please, kept. She may not be willing to sit through my session.
No, sir. It is interesting session.
Okay, fine. So moving further, if a child
Sir,
can't learn, yeah,
there is one question.
sure, please.
Sorry. Unmute करें. The participant who wanted to speak, now they can unmute and speak. Huh? We have unmuted the participant. Now you can speak and ask the question to sir.
Dr. Niket. Dr. Niket.
Yeah.
Good morning. Kindly to open the chat box, so we can post the questions in chat box.
Sir, chat box is available on your screen only.
No, it is not. It's only available for the two team members, not for all the participants.
Sir, just a minute. Sir, are you using your Gmail account?
Yeah. Yes.
Sir, then chat box doesn't work, sir.
Very nice. Okay. Thank you.
Otherwise, you can just raise your hand and unmute and ask the question, sir.
Thank you. Good day.
But in the process, I'm mightily disappointed. I thought somebody is going to ask me some question. So we were discussing about a technical issue.
Sorry, sir.
Okay. So basically, if a child can't learn the way we teach, maybe we should teach the way they learn. Everybody has got some kind of a capability. Some people are fast learners, some are slow learners, some are, of course, non-learners also. But still, we should give a fair chance for everybody to move up the curve, move up the learning curve. Teachers who believe that all students are their kids, who are not focused for income but outcome, who are passionate about whatever they are doing, will facilitate the learning in such a way that believe that teaching is the art of assisting discovery. Learning is, as was mentioned by the Pro Vice Chancellor, Dr. Peer Ahmed, learning is continuous. Learning is a journey and it is not a destination. Because learning is a journey and not a destination, everybody through the learning process becomes more conscious of self. It's a learning of self-discovery. And as a teacher, we should facilitate that self-discovery. Everybody is good at something or the other. Mother Nature would not have given us this opportunity to visit planet Earth if we are not required. Each one of us is capable of becoming something superlative. It is only the teacher who has got the privilege to influence that development. So we should facilitate that discovery process. The objective of education is learning, not teaching. So at the end of it, the litmus test is whether it was learned or not, whether it was not taught or not. Rather than trying to teach people, we should try to awaken them. It is made possible by applying 3 X's of instruction: explanations, examples, and experiences. When I was talking about the animal kingdom, I was taking examples. I was trying to give the experiences of 2 people, one great professor and one student who was brilliant in academics, but unfortunately, he was not good in life skills. The best universities are those that have the best professors. Just think about it. Each one of us, if we can start asking ourselves, what is it that we like the most? Which subject we like the most? Let's say somebody may say chemistry, somebody may say physics, somebody may say law, but just think about it. Whatever subject that we like today was taught to us by somebody whom we like. We didn't like a subject just like that. We liked the person who taught that subject. Because that person appealed to us, we were more attentive and we could grasp that subject much better than any other subject. This is my firm belief. If you can become accessible, affable, if you are opening your doors to others to knock you at their request, if you are able to reach out to people, people start connecting with you, and then people will start listening to you, and that is how they will start liking whatever you are going to talk. However superior a person may be in terms of knowledge, if they are not able to connect with the students, there won't be any engagement. And where there is no student engagement, there is no possibility of better student performance. Can anybody tell the subject which they like, which was taught by a person whom they did not like? I repeat, I want one of the participants to respond by saying that they like a particular discipline, a subject which was taught by someone whom they did not like. If nobody is responding, then I would like to ask Dr. Nikat also.
Can I comment and say something, please?
Please, please.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am, please.
Yeah, I would like actually not exactly what you said, but my take on it is that sometimes you love a subject, you excel in it because you teaching you.
Okay.
And that happens through all the way through our school years. And sometimes you develop a certain fear from subjects because you're a teacher in school. Let me talk about something in university. When I went and I did research, today the information that I learned and the little tools and tricks that I learned from a specific professor in the American University in Cairo, because she was wonderful. She had the balance between being fair, being strict, and being understandable at the same time. She taught us the basics in the best way possible. And it stayed with me all those years. And I believe I owe her my love to research and what I pass to my students. my own experience.
Thank you, ma'am, for resonating my thoughts. Just like the way a teacher can make the student love a subject, a faculty can also make a student hate that subject also. Because we are so powerful in a classroom environment, our fear can become the fear of all the students. There are faculty who are teaching quantitatives, but who are not good in number crunching. They start talking theory in the class, and in the examination paper also, I have seen some question papers where the question was define standard deviation. What are the uses of standard deviation? That means to say, if you have given some problem to solve, and if the student could solve it, you know that they have understood the concept of standard deviation. But because the faculty themselves are afraid, I'm just giving a simple example of standard deviation. It can be a high-end trigonometry or calculus also. But the fact remains that where it is not the circle of competence of the faculty, since they don't want to get into a danger zone, they will try to settle for a lower standard by asking a theoretical question so that some text can be put, some ink can be put on the paper so that that white paper becomes a dark paper, and in the process you can allocate some marks. So that means to say, just like a passionate teacher can inspire the student to like the subject, somebody who is not very serious in delivering that kind of academic rigor, someone who is very casual, somebody who is there by chance, may actually put in that kind of a fear in the students about the same subject, or maybe make the students dislike the subject. So that's precisely the reason why, as a teacher, we need to be having that scholarship, that authority on the subject. Again, I would like to connect with what Dr. Peer Ahmed has said. Every teacher should have that scholarship, should be very strong in their domain, so that they will be able to share that kind of a knowledge and wisdom, be it in terms of breadth or be it in terms of depth, so that students get the benefit of such domain experience and expertise. Basically, in teaching, we are explaining or we are showing so that students would learn as to how it should be done. But in case of learning, the objective is to change behavior by putting knowledge into practice. So that is why it is said that if you tell me and I am likely to forget, show me and I am not going to remember. But if you involve me, I will definitely understand. So the fundamental shift from teaching to learning is all about involving the students, making them do, making them participate, so that that learning will remain permanent. Basically, in terms of the commitment towards teaching, all those effective teachers are those who facilitate thinking. That's the most important job of a teacher. They would engage those minds so that they stay focused on the topics that are being discussed in a classroom environment. I listen to questions. They encourage people to ask questions. In fact, asking a relevant question is more difficult than answering. Answering a question is any day much easier than asking a relevant question. These teachers encourage risk taking. They encourage students to step out of their comfort zones. They support the struggle. They wouldn't give an answer very quickly. They would make the students explore all the methods, and even then if the student is not able to crack it, that's the time when they try to move forward and help them. They enable them to cultivate the dreams, because every student, even at a PG level, are starved of ideas in terms of what kind of a role that they can play when they complete their post-graduation. So you can imagine people at undergraduate level, they wouldn't have a clue about what kind of job they are supposed to do, what kind of job opportunities are likely to crop up. So one should be given that kind of a space so that they can start dreaming about certain professions which may not be known to them at this juncture. And a teacher should be a constant learner, keeping their eyes and ears open to learn whatever is relevant in their domain as well as outside their domain, so that they can connect the dots. Basically, learners are those who are always thinking, always questioning. They are trying to apply the design thinking principles also, or they are trying to design their course curriculum. They are trying to organize their thoughts so that they will be able to deliver the session more effectively. They are trying to create scenarios in which students can play multiple roles. They can simulate the environment so that students believe that they are having positional superiority to make decisions. They facilitate the struggle. They also struggle, but at the same time they will try to collaborate. Wherever there is a disconnect between the teacher and the student, learning doesn't happen. So we need to try again and again, like as they say, you think and act, you act and fail, you fail and learn, you learn and succeed. I repeat, think and act and fail, fail and learn, learn and succeed. Everybody has to go through this process, whether we like it or not. So we have to keep trying, and we should basically be a problem solver. Like as they say, if we are not part of the solution, that means we are part of the problem. So in any scenario, in any situation, we should not be the problem. As a teacher, we should never be part of the problem, we should be part of the solution. And I invent, I reflect. We need to be innovative. We need to look back before the session, during the session, and after the session. We should reflect and figure out whether we did perform according to our expectations or not. Sometimes we might have prepared well. Sometimes we might not have prepared, but still we might have performed well. But only the teacher would know whether the performance was within the expectations or not. Okay. Okay. There are certain phrases which we should try to avoid if we have to create that kind of a learning ambience, which is supportive, which is more promising and productive. More often than not, we find teachers saying, do this. Instead of saying do this, we can say, what do you think? Instead of saying, listen to this, we can always say, try it out. Instead of saying, here is what you have to use, you can say, choose your tool. Basically, whenever we are trying to use our positional superiority in a classroom, very few students would like to participate in the class. After all, every human being believes that freedom is their birthright. So if we are trying to be more like a dictator in a classroom environment, the willingness to learn takes a back seat. So whenever we have to say, choose your tool, they are exercising their choice. So either they want to choose or they will opt not to choose. But that choice gives them that freedom. They feel empowered. They feel that they are sitting in the driver's seat and making things happen. Create something instead of saying, here is a pattern. We should not do spoon feeding. There are faculty, even in a PG level, start giving notes, running notes to students. That is something we know which we should try to avoid. I come from that part of India where students are spoon fed, especially in Andhra and Telangana, southern part of India, Andhra and Telangana. Because I've been born and brought up in this place for almost 50 years. I can tell about this state more than any other state of India. Our students in this particular United Andhra are fairly good, more attentive, or they are more focused on learning. But end of it, they have specialized in rote learning, mugging up, trying to learn through repetition. So their problem is, when these students get very good ranks in IIT and JEE or NEET examination, they join very good institutions like IITs, institutions of national repute and all that. But once they go to such institutions also at a UG level or PG level, they start asking the professors, give us some notes. If you give notes, we will be very comfortable and all. So you can imagine how these kids were spoiled because they were spoon fed up to their +2 levels. So instead of directly telling them, here are the steps, follow these steps, because I want to put a tick in my box as a teacher and trying to say that I'm done with my syllabus. I do understand not all of us are having that luxury to teach at our own pace. It is very unfortunate. Some of the institutions are putting so much of pressure on assistant professors, associate professors, including professors, that they handle as many as 6 to 8 subjects in a semester. So when you are teaching so many subjects, the top priority would be to put a tick in the box and say, I'm done with the syllabus. I have finished, not completed. I have finished the syllabus. So under such circumstances, we don't have that luxury of time. We can't say, here are the steps, or we cannot say, how are you going to solve the problem? And we'll say, here are the steps, you just follow these steps, you'll get the solution. So my humble request to leaders of educational institutions, if you are participating in this program, please provide some kind of a space for the faculty also to get to know the student, to facilitate the learning in a manner that would make the student a lifelong learner. So instead of saying, go ahead and do it again, we can always say, you know this already, so let us skip it. Because we need to make the students understand a variety of problems. So rather than repeating the same format again and again, rather than telling something which they already know, which they have already understood, we should always move to something which is a totally different arena. So there are different methods by which we can make the students feel that they can excel in learning, because learning is a journey. So we should let them navigate. We should challenge them. We should push them to limits so that they will explore. We should watch them discovering themselves. We should encourage them to ask questions. I've been repeatedly encouraging, but participants choose to avoid asking me questions. I think they are parking it and going to come out with a barrage of questions towards the end of the session. But I would encourage them to ask me now itself rather than putting it on hold till the end of the session. We also allow them to struggle. We support while they are thinking. Rather than directly giving the answer, we should make them explore on their own. If we look at the varied modalities of learning, some people are very good at auditory skills, some are good at visual, and others are at kinesthetic levels. While listening is relatively easy, we have not been taught to listen. All through the schooling, we were taught how to speak, but nobody has taught us how to listen. That is why when we start listening, after a few minutes we start hearing, from listening to hearing, and in the process, a lecture method is not very effective because the retention rates are the lowest for the learners whenever the lecture method is applied. Instead, if we ask the student to read it, there is a greater retention capability. If it is something which is related to audio visual, there is greater involvement, and that is why almost 20% of what was heard and watched gets registered in the minds of the students. But if we start, we get the students to demonstrate, or we demonstrate as a teacher and ask the student to watch very closely, watch aggressively. Through aggressive observation, their ability to understand and retain is much higher. When we encourage them to participate in discussions, then the learning is much more deeper. Their retention is as high as 50%. And when they start practicing, when they start watching us and then they start practicing whatever we have told them to do, the engagement levels are much higher, because of which it becomes active participation or active learning methods. And once they start teaching others, the retention rates are the highest at 90%. Given a choice, we should downplay on lecture method as much as is possible. Involve the students in an audio visual or reading formats. As far as practicable, we should demonstrate the text. We should convert that text into some kind of a demonstration. Like the current trend in most of the institutions of repute is gamification, trying to convert everything like a game, so that the game, like everybody, all human beings are inclined towards playing games. Gamification is that science which makes even a difficult subject more interesting, because when we apply our creativity skills and design a game around the concept, the message will be very strong and the learning will be extremely powerful. Edgar Dale's cone of experience says people generally remember 10% of what they read and 20% of what they hear. Edgar Dale's cone of experience is slightly different from what we have discussed in the last slide. But at the end of it, if you are asking them to do something, at the most they may be able to define, describe, or list or explain. These are all very low order thinking skills according to Bloom's taxonomy. But when the students watch still pictures, they can retain 30% of what they see. If they are watching movies, moving pictures, or if they are viewing exhibits, 50% of what they see and hear, they can retain. With this knowledge, armed with this knowledge, they can demonstrate whatever they have seen. They can apply this knowledge in an appropriate context, and they can even practice it also. Now, if they are allowed to participate in a hands-on workshop or engage in a role play for a given situation, 70% of what they say and write can be retained. And this knowledge will take them to the higher order thinking skills where they can analyze the situation, where they can design a new product, or where they can create or evaluate. More so when they model or simulate a real life experience. That is why case studies are considered to be a very powerful method of learning, pioneered by Harvard Business School or Harvard University to be more precise. A simulation of a real life experience or a case study which is a real life incident, maybe you mask some numbers, you change the names, but the context is real. You are enabling the learners to pass through the learning curve very swiftly. Because if you were to sit in the hot seat and make a decision, you know how you would have analyzed the situation. Direct purposeful experience go through the real experience, where one has to learn from their own experience by performing the task. Almost 90% they have done, they'll be able to for the rest of their lifetime. So basically the purpose of Edgar Dale's thought process for us is involve the students as much as is possible. Involve them in activities, move away from text and audio, maybe bring in some kind of a visual relief for them, make them participate, give them some role to play, because every student may not be good in academics, but the moment you tell them to participate, they would be too willing to participate. And probably those who are very weak in academics, if you observe, I think from our own experiences we can watch for this. Whenever a university or an institution is conducting some kind of a program, some management fest or annual fest and all that, invariably you will find students who are very weak in academics are dangerously active in such. They are the ones who will be in the forefront. They are the ones who will contribute a lot than those who are very good in academics. That means to say, everybody has got some skill or the other. Not everybody needs to be good in academics, but as a teacher, we need to at least make mediocre students average students. Those who are average, above average, and those who are above average, our job is to make them excellent. That means to say, as a teacher, we need to segregate our students into groups of slow learners, medium learners, and fast learners. Slow learners, we should go that extra mile. We may, if it is required, we should do some tutoring for them. But at the same time, engage those fast learners or advanced learners by asking them to do assignments or probing them to do questions or giving them probing questions, which will also make them feel that they are being challenged, including those who are average learners. We should take everybody in our stride and we should try to make everybody feel that we are there to enable them to move to the next level of capability. Because in every classroom environment, not all students will be disciplined. In spite of our inputs, some students will not perform well. Despite our inputs, some students will excel. So our job is to look at those students who are in need of our inputs more, and we should do that extra legwork and brain work for them so that they also join the mainstream and get the benefit of higher education. Just like since it is COVID time, typically if you see in every country, ventilators are very less in hospitals. How are the hospitals deciding who should be provided with this ventilation facility? Those who are definitely going to die despite provision of ventilation, they are not given priority. Hospitals are not providing ventilation facility to those patients who with certainty will not survive. They are also not giving ventilation facility to those patients who will survive any which way in spite of the struggle. That means ventilators are earmarked only for those patients without which they are going to die. That means exclusively ventilators are given to those patients who will die if they are not provided ventilation. Similarly, in a classroom environment, we should be more focused on those students who require our inputs, who will actually benefit from our inputs, rather than those people who are somehow going to survive or somehow are going to prosper or going to pass the examination and prosper in life without our inputs, or those people who don't require our inputs. In a class, everybody is equally important for us. Nevertheless, we should give more focus on those students who require our inputs very badly. And it is not they who will decide that. As a teacher, you are the best judge of the situation. So we should figure out who needs our inputs more and we should try to accommodate them. Basically, the problem of teaching is more content oriented, but learning is more student oriented. In a learning centric education, the teachers are facilitating that learning process. This is made possible because we know with certainty what our students should learn. We should know about the students themselves so that we can map this to them. And we should have a strong mechanism in place for assessment to know whether such learning has happened or not. A, we need to know the students. We need to know how they learn. Since we are expert in our subject, we should know how to do this transmission of knowledge to them in a manner that they can learn effectively. And at the end of it, we should have a mechanism to figure out whether they have really learnt it or not. That's most important. That's why the outcome-based education talks about 5 Ds. 5 Ds. Define outcomes, design curriculum, deliver instructions, document results, determine advancement. Or you can put the determine advancement and document the results. I repeat once again for the benefit of those who are taking down the notes, because I have not put it on a slide. Define outcomes. First D, define outcome. Design curriculum. Deliver instructions. Document results. Determine advancement. According to all accreditation bodies, which look at certain skill set from higher education students, there are 8 different domain areas of learning outcomes, along with 7 categories of graduate attributes, which are necessary for a student of higher education to be considered as effective, because the program objectives for every higher education program, doesn't matter whether it is science, engineering, technology or management, all higher education programs across the world provide these different domain skills supported by certain categories of attributes which are required to be effective after the completion of the program. That is why Dr. Abdul Kalam used to say, the problem in India is not unemployment. The problem in India is not unemployment. The real problem is employability. The real problem is employability, because majority of students across the length and breadth of the country are simply passing the examination, getting a piece of paper, but they are not acquiring the necessary skill set. Their employability is at stake, and even research has proved beyond a shadow of doubt that at least 85% of our students pursuing higher education in India are not employable. They are not employable at all. They are acquiring peripheral knowledge. Attitude is not being shaped. The kind of attitude that they carry Parents are tolerating them at home because they have committed that sin of bringing them to this planet Earth. There is no reason why the industry should tolerate them. It is very unfortunate that there is very stiff competition amongst universities in India. There are more than 1,000 universities in India at this juncture. 1,000 universities in India. There are more universities than the students. So instead of universities choosing their students, students are choosing their universities, except the top 100 or the top 200 or the top 300. Majority of the higher educational institutions are chasing students and bringing them by after spending 40,000 to 50,000 rupees per admission. So obviously the input is so substandard. Whatever may be your effort in the 3-year program or 2-year program or 4-year program, at the end of this, there is not much of a needle change. The needle movement is not noticeable also, because a lot of people who are getting into higher education, I'm not talking about the top 200 or 300 universities or institutions, which are still very strong because their value system is very strong. They are built on very solid foundation. Their founders know what they mean when they talk about education. But unfortunately, majority of the faculty who are associated with different institutions, they don't have that luxury. So you settle with students who are not inclined towards learning, nor they have the attitude. Because at the end of the day, recruiters hire character and train the skill. I repeat, prospective recruiters hire character and they can also train them in skill development. So basically the problem with most of these students is they are not eligible to pursue higher education, but they have gone through the system, they have run through the system, and they have come out of undergraduation. So today they are entering post-graduation. But the fact remains that it becomes a major challenge for the faculty also, because faculty has not been trained in teaching. I'm pretty sure, unlike in case of schools where faculty are trained, where teachers have gone through some kind of a training, people who are teaching at higher education, including myself, for the last 27 years I've been into training, teaching, training and research. Nobody has trained me in teaching. So I'm not pretty sure whether I'm a good trainer or teacher. The fact that I have been in this activity for the last 27 years makes me believe that I'm not a bad teacher. But there is no reason why I should feel that I'm a great teacher. So that means to say, unlike in case of school education where there are formal methods, there is formal training that is given to every teacher, faculty at UG or PG level, they are not trained in teaching, and that's precisely the reason right from day one you are on an autopilot, you are expected to deliver. Nobody is bothered whether you are struggling or not. Nobody is trying to understand your problems. Nobody bothers to talk about the students whom we are teaching. Irrespective of the character of the student, irrespective of the inclination of the student towards learning, we are expected to ensure that they perform well. So that's precisely the reason why I would request each one of you to step back and think, because we were not trained, we should be taking opportunities like this to get to know what are the effective methods of teaching so that we can connect with the students. Whether they are good, bad or sad, doesn't matter. We should be able to make that connect with them so that they should start feeling that we are accessible, they can speak out, they will open up and they'll start sharing their maybe sometimes even personal problems. But over a period of time, you'll build a very strong relationship and that relationship lasts longer than anything. I was reminded of a particular episode where Dr. Shankar Dayal Sharma, when he was the President of India, visited one of the Gulf countries. And it is a normal protocol in the Gulf countries where some dignitaries would come and receive any foreign dignitaries, or some higher officials in the Gulf region would come and receive the foreign dignitaries at the airport and all, but nothing more than that. But this king had personally come and received Dr. Shankar Dayal Sharma, not because Dr. Shankar Dayal Sharma was the President of India, but because Dr. Shankar Dayal Sharma has taught this king. So it is this respect for a teacher which had made the king come to the airport and receive Dr. Shankar Dayal Sharma. I think at times we can't even imagine how much our influence spreads, because every student is watching us in a classroom environment. Every student is trying to figure out how we are dealing with complexity, how we are dealing with failure also. Not necessarily that we may be successful every day in the class. Even Virat Kohli also gets out for a duck at times. We should start accepting this failure even in a classroom so that students learn to deal with failure. A majority of people who are committing suicide are the ones who have not dealt with failure. I think it is this life skill every faculty, every teacher should impart to the students. Only then students will become much more stronger intellectually also, as well as mentally. That mental balance should not disturb. I'm reminded of one particular episode of John McEnroe. I understand John McEnroe, when he was a winner of many Grand Slams, his father never understood tennis, the game of tennis. One day when he was playing for Wimbledon, or when he was playing Wimbledon match, he called his dad, it seems, to come down to Wimbledon, a place in London, to come and watch that match. His dad was still not interested. So he told his dad, John McEnroe told his dad, if you come down to Wimbledon Stadium and watch me playing this final match, you will be privileged to sit beside the Queen of England. I don't know how much was the price those days. Currently it is around £25,000 to watch that match. So probably equivalent to that. So he was telling his dad, you would have had to pay such a huge price or payment in order to sit there. Because I'm playing the final, you will be privileged to come and sit there. So John McEnroe's father was, I think, now encouraged. So he came all the way to watch that match. And as Murphy's law strikes, as you might have guessed it, John McEnroe lost that match. But very interestingly, in fact, this was told by McEnroe, so I would like to reiterate that. It seems during that match, John McEnroe committed a lot of unforced errors. The opponent, whomsoever it is, had a very clear edge over McEnroe in that match. And McEnroe could not digest that fact that somebody else can play much better than him. And he was shouting at the top of his voice to say that he's losing. So at the end of it, when John McEnroe had to face his father told him, it seems, if you can't learn to fail, you are not eligible to play. So that was a very powerful lesson for McEnroe, and McEnroe subsequently gained more confidence and started playing well because of that episode where his dad taught him to fail with grace also. That is why even in business, failure is acceptable, but fraud is not acceptable. So companies can fail just like companies can succeed. But as every student of ours today, one day they become a manager, or once they become a professional in their respective domain, they should also carry with them these kind of skills which enable them to be a die-hard, player in this business called life, rather than trying to feel defeated and committing suicide. So the 21st century skills which are required for every student, because we can focus on these 21st century skills in a classroom environment, irrespective of the subject that we are teaching. We can bring these skills in any kind of domain and make the students connect with these 4 C's: communication, collaboration, critical thinking, and creativity. Because this is more learner centric. We are trying to figure out whether the students are very good in communication. We should help them. Whomsoever is making a mistake while communicating, we should try to correct them. Not in an intimidating way, but in a manner that makes them to understand why we have corrected them. Because we can always make them realize the importance of better communication without being negative about it, so that they start sharing their thoughts, questions, ideas, and solutions. Because unfortunately, most of the Indian students maybe are good at the content. They know what is being taught. They have understood it also, but they cannot express it. And people who cannot express will always try to impress. Will always try to impress. That is why, if you have observed, when an Indian writes an English book, it will be more difficult. It will be more difficult to understand. When a Westerner writes an English book, it will be relatively easy. Because the Westerner is actually trying to express, whereas the Indian author is trying to impress. Aggregate these 21st century learning skills into literacy, competitiveness, and character qualities. Unfortunately, when we see people who are antisocial elements also, they are all sometimes very good in education. They also have got very high educational qualifications and all. So that means to say the third element, the character qualities, are the ones, are that segment where they could not really build up. So maybe teachers and faculty were more focused on making them more literate, more competitive, but they could not build their character. So basically, whatever may be the subject that you are handling, I would urge each one of you to facilitate even character building. Whenever somebody says something which is not acceptable to you, which is not acceptable to the general public at large, please feel free and tell the student where they are going wrong, because parents of late feel shy to tell their children. So it is the teacher who should take up this ownership, because teaching is half parenting. In fact, a student spends more time in a classroom than at home, or in the educational institution than at home. So I think, we should take that responsibility of making the students learn their dark spots, make them understand their own rough edges, help them to change for better. According to WHO, these are the three sets of skills which are considered to be extremely important. Social skills, cutting across communication, interpersonal relationship, empathy and self-awareness. Thinking skills, cutting across problem solving, decision making, creativity and critical thinking. And emotional skills, coping with stress and coping with emotion. Because education does not stop after their participants are there at this juncture. I wish I could see, but anyways, if we have to touch our heart and answer this basic question,